The Thorne Estate was a sprawling Victorian monstrosity that seemed to exhale the scent of wet cedar and forgotten secrets. Elias Thorne, a man whose life was dictated by high-speed fiber optics and glass-walled offices, felt like a ghost walking through these halls. His grandfather, Silas, had been a recluse, a man who traded human companionship for a house filled with mechanical oddities. After the funeral, the lawyers handed Elias a heavy iron key and a warning that sounded more like a curse. In the center of the mahogany-paneled study, sitting atop a desk that looked like it belonged to a hanging judge, was the object. A heavy, obsidian-black rotary telephone. Its surface didn't just reflect the light. It seemed to swallow it. The bakelite receiver was scarred with deep grooves, as if someone had gripped it in a white-knuckled panic for decades. Elias noticed the cord immediately. It was a frayed braided fabric line that ended abruptly in a jagged snap of copper wires. It wasn't connected to the wall. It wasn't connected to anything. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the cold metal dial. As his skin made contact, a vibration hummed through his bones, not a mechanical buzz, but a low rhythmic thrumming, like a distant heartbeat. He remembered the frantic postscript in Silas's will, written in ink so dark it had bled through the paper. The connection is not through the wires, Elias. It is through the blood. If the bell tolls, the debt is due. Never, under the breath of God, pick up the receiver. If it rings, leave the house and never look back. Elias scoffed, though his heart hammered against his ribs. He draped a velvet cloth over the machine to hide its predatory silhouette. But that night, the air in the house turned brittle. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the silence was shattered. A mechanical, piercing trill, burr-ring, erupted from the study. It was a sound that shouldn't exist in a house without power. It was the sound of a metal hammer striking a brass bell with a violence that made the floorboards shake. Elias lay in the dark, paralyzed, as the ringing grew louder, more insistent, pulsating with a rhythmic hunger that seemed to call his name from the depths of the static. The ringing didn't stop. For 20 minutes, the sound tore through the house, vibrating the glass in the windows until they groaned. Elias found himself standing at the study door, his hand on the brass knob. He told himself he was a rational man. He told himself it was a prank, a hidden battery, a lingering ghost of magnetism. But his soul knew better. The room was freezing, his breath misting in the air like pale ghosts. The velvet cloth had fallen to the floor. The phone sat there, the dial spinning slowly on its own, clicking back to zero with a sound like bone snapping. Clack, clack, clack. Elias felt a magnetic pull. His hand moved as if guided by an invisible thread. He lifted the heavy receiver. The weight was immense, like lifting a leaden weight from a coffin.
"Hello?" he whispered. His voice felt small and pathetic in the vast, dark room.
There was no dial tone. Instead, there was the sound of wind, a vast, rushing gale that smelled of ozone and ancient dust. And then, the breathing. It was heavy, wet, and labored, as if someone were drowning in thick oil. Between the breaths, a voice that wasn't a voice, more a collection of frequencies, vibrated against his ear. It didn't speak words, but Elias felt a name being erased from his mind. Click. The line went dead. The silence that followed was worse than the ringing. The next morning, the world felt thinner. His phone buzzed. A text from his brother, Toby's boss. Toby hadn't shown up. Elias rushed to Toby's apartment, his stomach a knot of cold lead. He found his brother in the living room, sitting in a chair facing a blank wall. Toby was stone cold. His eyes were open, his pupils blown wide as if he'd seen the sun explode. There were no marks on him, save for a faint circular bruise on his ear, the exact shape of a telephone receiver. On his lap was a sketch pad. Toby had drawn a rotary dial, but instead of numbers, there were 10 different faces of his family members. Toby's own face was in the one slot. It had been crossed out in black ink. Grief is a powerful fuel for rage. Elias returned to the estate with a sledgehammer. He swung with every ounce of his sorrow, aiming for the black bakelite heart of the machine. The hammer struck the phone with a deafening clang, but the tool bounced off, vibrating Elias's arms until his teeth ached. There wasn't a scratch on the phone. In a fit of desperation, he wrapped the device in heavy chains, drove to the bridge over the Blackwood River, and heaved it into the churning, muddy depths. He watched the bubbles rise and vanish. "Stay there," he hissed. "Stay in the mud with the rest of the dead." He checked into a modern hotel downtown, a place of glass and white light where the past couldn't reach him. He sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. But as the clock struck 3:03 a.m., the bedside phone, a modern plastic VoIP device, began to ring. Brrr ring, brrr ring. The digital display didn't show a room number. It showed 00000. Panic surged through him. He ran to the hallway, but every door he passed had a phone ringing behind it. The sound was a symphony of mechanical bells and electronic chirps, all synchronized, all screaming for him. He took the stairs, but the emergency phone in the stairwell began to wail. Even his own smartphone, powered off and sitting in his pocket, vibrated with a heat that scorched his thigh. He pulled it out to see the screen cracked in the shape of a rotary dial. He realized then that the black phone wasn't just an object. It was an anchor. It had marked his frequency. He was no longer a person. He was a subscriber to a network of the damned. He fled into the night, the sound of ringing following him like a pack of hounds, echoing from payphones that hadn't worked in decades and chirping from the pockets of passing strangers who looked at him with hollow, unseeing eyes. Elias sought out Sarah Vance, a disgraced historian who specialized in anomalous artifacts. They met in a crowded cafe, the noise of the public acting as a thin shield. Sarah looked at Elias with pity. She opened a leather-bound ledger and showed him a photograph from 1890. There, in a black and white parlor, sat the same black phone.
"It's called the Collector's Ear," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "It was forged during the Great Plague by a man who lost his entire lineage. He didn't want to talk to the living. He wanted to bring the dead back to the table. He used the metal from mourning bells and the charcoal from crematoriums. The phone doesn't use electricity, Elias. It uses the life current of the family line. Every time a call is answered, the circuit completes, and a soul is pulled into the static to keep the line open."
As she spoke, the cafe grew unnervingly quiet. Every person in the shop reached for their phones simultaneously. A low hum filled the room. Sarah's cell phone began to vibrate on the table. "Don't!" Elias warned, his voice cracking. "Sarah, don't look at it!"
It was Toby's voice. "Elias, Sarah, it's so dark here. It's like being underwater, but the water is made of voices. Please, pick up. I need to tell you where the door is. Toby."
The world began to fray at the edges for Elias. He was no longer sleeping. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw the dial. He began to see a figure, the static man. At first, it was just a smudge in his peripheral vision, a glitch in the air. But as the deaths mounted, the figure became more solid. It was a tall, unnaturally thin silhouette composed of gray, flickering lines, like an old television tuned to a dead channel. The static man didn't walk. He existed in a series of still frames. He would be at the end of a hallway, then 10 feet closer, then standing right behind Elias, the air around him crackling with the smell of scorched copper and ozone. The entity was the operator of the black phone, the one who moved the souls through the wires. Elias tried to call his parents to warn them, to tell them to throw their phones into the sea, but the network was compromised. He dialed his father's number, but he didn't hear his father's voice. He heard the sound of a metal hammer hitting a bell. Brrr, ring. Then, he heard his father's confused voice. "Hello, is someone there? There's a strange man in the yard, Elias. He looks like he's made of smoke." "Dad, hang up! Throw the phone away!" Elias screamed. But it was too late. Through the line, Elias heard the sound of the rotary dial spinning. Clack, clack, clack. Then, a sickening crunch, like a plastic shell being crushed. His father's voice vanished, replaced by a high-pitched electronic scream that tore through Elias's head. He dropped his phone, watching as the screen liquefied into a black, oily sludge. He was the last one left. The collector had cleared the line. The air in the Thorne mansion had become thick, like breathing through wet wool. Elias sat in the center of the study, illuminated only by a single flickering candle. Around him, the shadows of the static man danced, lengthening and shortening with every heartbeat. He had found the hidden floorboard beneath Silas's desk, revealing a cache of ancient wax cylinders and a handwritten ledger titled, "The Frequency of Souls." Elias placed a cylinder onto the old phonograph. His grandfather's voice emerged, distorted by a century of dust. "The phone is a lock, Elias. To break it, you must enter the combination of your own undoing. You must dial the number of the unborn. But the dial is not moved by fingers. It is moved by the weight of what you are willing to lose." The ledger explained the horrific mechanics of the out dial. To turn the dial for the first digit, Elias had to focus on his most cherished memory. He reached for the obsidian receiver, his skin crawling as the bakelite warmed beneath his touch, feeling like human flesh. He envisioned his 5th birthday, the smell of chocolate cake, and the sound of his brother's laughter. He forced that memory into his arm and pulled the dial to the 9. As it clicked back, the memory vanished. He could remember the cake, but he could no longer feel the joy. He was hollow. The static man shrieked in the corner, a sound like a server room melting down as the first layer of the curse began to peel away. The room was now a blizzard of psychic feedback. Elias's nose began to bleed, the crimson drops splattering onto the black phone. He reached for the next number, an 8. This time he had to sacrifice his sense of touch. As the dial spun back, his hands went numb. He could see his fingers gripping the metal, but he felt nothing, as if his limbs were made of stone. From the earpiece, the voices of the dead returned. It wasn't just Toby and Sarah anymore. It was a choir of hundreds. "Stop, Elias!" his mother's voice pleaded, sounding as though she were being squeezed through a pinhole. "If you finish the sequence, we will be erased. Not dead, but never born. Do you want to kill us twice?" The static man was no longer a shadow. He was a physical presence, his flickering limbs brushing against Elias's neck. The smell of burning hair filled the room. Elias realized the phone was a psychic predator, using the voices of his loved ones as a firewall to protect itself. To save his own soul, he had to be willing to forget those he was trying to avenge. He reached for the 7, his vision beginning to tunnel into a pinprick of white light. He reached the final digit, 0. In the language of the unhallowed, 0 was the great Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. It was the point of no return. As Elias placed his trembling finger into the final hole of the rotary wheel, the phone did something it had never done before. It didn't ring. It vibrated with a human voice, his own voice, but older, colder, and filled with a terrifying wisdom.
"Do you really think Silas died of natural causes, Elias? He didn't fail the ritual. He completed it. He didn't want to stop the ringing. He wanted to become the one who dials. Look at your hands, Elias. Look at the wires."
Elias looked down. Fine. Copper filaments were beginning to sprout from his pores, weaving into the frayed cord of the telephone. The static man wasn't attacking him. He was waiting for him. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The collector wasn't a monster from the outside. It was the previous owner of the phone, transformed by the ritual into a digital wraith. If he finished the dial, he wouldn't break the curse. He would merely take his place as the next operator of the damned. The study floor dissolved. Elias found himself suspended in a void of endless, glowing circuitry. Thousands of black telephones sat on obsidian pedestals, stretching into an infinite horizon. This was the exchange, the purgatory where every unanswered call and every severed connection lived.
The line must always be open. Someone must hold the receiver. Someone must listen to the screams so the world above remains silent.
Elias saw the millions of people in the world above, all holding their smartphones, all connected to this dark heart. He realized that if he let go, the collector would be free to manifest in reality and harvest everyone at once. To save the world, he had to accept the ultimate isolation. He sat at the desk in the void. He picked up the receiver and held it to his ear. The copper wires from his skin fused with the machine. He was no longer Elias Thorne. He was the new operator. He began to dial a number, not to kill but to warn. But to the living, his warning only sounded like a terrifying mechanical ring. Years passed in the world above. The Thorne Estate was eventually demolished, and a sleek, modern apartment complex was built on its bones. In Unit 402, a young college student named Maya was unpacking her boxes. She found an old black rotary phone in a junk shop, thinking it would be a vibe for her new nightstand. She didn't notice that it had no plug.
That night, at 3:03 a.m., the phone rang. Brr ring, brr ring. Maya groaned and reached for it, her eyes half closed. "Hello?" she mumbled. "I'm sorry. I tried to stay silent. But the hunger of the line is too great."